Good morning everyone, and welcome to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today I have a project for us that was kind of one of those last minute decisions, and if we don't get started on it now, we won't be able to enjoy it for the holiday. So join me right after this and I'll tell you what it is and we'll get started right away. Well, hi, are you ready for a new project? Well, I am. We just finished up this bear paw project, and before you know it, Valentine's Day is going to be here, and I decided we needed a little bit of a break and we needed to do something fun. So I found a free pattern out on the internet, and this one is called Love Note. It is a free quilt pattern from the Fat Quarter Shop. So if you will go to www.fatquartershop.com, you should be able to find this pattern there. Now mine's printed in black and white. I don't know if you can print it in color or not, but it seems to be a very quick and easy thing that we can probably get together all here, at least the quilt top, just in one session. So let's get started. It is comprised of 4 fabrics for me, plus whatever we use for backing and binding. And probably we'll go through everything today as far as the piecing goes, and then I'll back and bind it and then bring it back at the end of the show for a reveal. But right now, let's worry about the piecing. And it's got the 4 fabrics. Now what I'm using is I'm using this gray fabric for my background. And everything here came from my stash except for this. And I did go out and purchase this as a tie between the red fabric that I have and the pink fabric that I wanted to use, so we can kind of tie it all together. So only one small purchase for this. So we've got the gray as our background. We've got the red for the heart right here in the middle of the project. And then for the envelope, we've got a combination of this new pink and red hearts on white, and then a solid kind of a, I think this is actually called ballet pink is the fabric. I used it on a project a long time ago, and I don't have much of it left, but it's a good way to use up small pieces. Now, what is nice about this pattern in looking at it is she does give you cutting diagrams on the bottom down here. So if you're purchasing the sizes that she says, you will see how they recommend that you cut it. I'm not going to go through all the sizes and the shapes and stuff like that, because you can see that in the pattern. But the first step on this project is we're going to be putting on some blocks in the corners of our heart piece, which is this dark red with the light pink hearts in it. Now I did pay close attention to how it is constructed, so I can make sure that when I get it all together, all of the heart pieces should be appropriately matched. So mine's going to go like this. I think you can see this from the overhead, and this will be the heart pattern. So I wanted to make sure these were lined up. If you're using something that doesn't have a clear direction, you don't need to worry about that. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew on these corner blocks, and this is pretty straightforward. You just draw a line down the center of the fabric, and I was looking to see if I had a little scrap of fabric, but we'll keep our fingers crossed that this works okay. You know, when you're working starting out of a corner, sometimes we have problems with bird's nest, but that seemed to work okay. Okay, there's one, and then here's the other one. Again, pretty straightforward. And then we have one piece we're sewing on the edge, and I'm going to flip out the feet real quick. We're going to do that seam as well while we're here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick look at the pattern and just see if there's any other seams that we need to do while we're here, and I don't think we do. So I am going to, where are my scissors? There they are. I feel like I'm in a race, and I really shouldn't be. This should be all about fun. So I'm going to slow myself down just a little bit. Okay, let's get those out. Now we should have that nice little rollover there as we press that back. And that's going to be the next thing I do. I'm going to step over to the ironing board and press those, and we will continue. They're all pressed now. Let me tell you that because we are working with a pale, somewhat thin fabric, I did press it down to the darker side, which in one of these didn't seem very logical, but I think that in the long run we'll be happy we did that. So I did that for both pieces, and now I'm trimming it at about 1/4 inch. So now we have both of these pieces together, and the next step, of course, is to sew these so they become one heart. And I'm gonna just put us a pin here to hold it. They're pretty big pieces, and I don't think they need a whole lot of care to make sure they're lined up. Well, that was pretty quick, and now we have our heart, and this is going to be the center of all the attention in this, so we want to make sure that comes together really well. So that looks pretty good and really fast, right? We could have been a little more generous on that one, but I think that'll be okay. And our hearts are lined up going in the right direction. Now the next step on this is we're going to be adding in the border around this, and this is going to be what they call the inside of the envelope. And for that I have chosen this pale pink. And what they're asking us to do is line up one piece here. I always like to check and make sure I'm lined up with the camera so you can actually see what's going on. And for this particular one, I think they had us cut 2 pieces one length and then 2 pieces a little bit longer. And you'll see I'm using the short one here. Now this is the seam we have not pressed, so I'm just going to move forward with this, and then we'll press and then add the other 2. And then this is the other short pink piece. We'll start up here. I love this little magnetic pin bowl, and but the only problem that I have is sometimes it's a little hard to get the pins out. I end up throwing them out on the board or whatever I'm working on and pick them up. But as far as storing and getting pins back in place, it is excellent. And I do notice that now you can buy these in the fabric sections. When I bought this, there was not anything available. This came from an auto parts store. You know what? I take that back. It wasn't an auto parts store. It was an electronics store where they sold parts to computers and things like that. And it was used for collecting and keeping track of parts. Okay, just a 1/4 inch seam down both of these sides. All right, we are going to take a moment and we're going to press this 2 seams we just sewed and the one in the middle, and then we'll come back and put the other 2 sides on. Now with those pressed, we're going to move on to our next border, which is going to be the longer 2 pieces of, in our case, the pale pink fabric. And I'm just going to pin those in the same manner. Anytime you see your fabric wanting to curl so that it's not fully pressed out, be sure to give that just a little stretch to straighten it out. If it looks like it's something that's going to require a bigger stretch, a little more pull, then you might want to consider restitching it. But I think we're okay here. There's one side. And I noticed that on one of these, I have a really stubborn crease in there. I think it may be a crease from the original fold on the bolt. So I turned up my iron just a smidgen, but that might require a spritz of water to press it and not just the steam. Okay, one more pin. All right, and we're going to sew those real quick. So far this is going together really well, and I did want to say that the finished size of this is 20.5 by 24, so it's a pretty small project. It's not huge. It would probably be a great addition to a teacher's door, for a door maybe on the inside of your house or a wall hanging for that holiday. For us, Valentine's is not a huge holiday, but we enjoy seeing a little bit of decorations around it. Now this is going to need to be pressed, but in the meantime, let's move on. My chair is stuck. Okay, let's move on to the next step, and then we'll press a couple of things at the same time. Now, we're talking now about the envelope, and then this is going to be this fabric here. And what they're saying is to cut the fabric A square and the fabric J square on the diagonal at once. So this is the A is the background and the J is the outside of the envelope. So they're saying to cut both of these at the same time. And I would prefer this way if we can. Get them all level. And then we're going to need, I think, this ruler. Let's make sure we've got them lined up, because I really don't want to have to cut them again. Okay, I think we're good there. And we're just going to place that right corner to corner. Ah, great cut. Okay. Woo! That worked out well. Now, what they're saying to do is they're saying to hook these two pieces like this, and these two pieces like this. You can see that around our heart. So we are going to have to press this before we move forward. So I'm going to do that now, and then we are going to stitch those together. Our center square is all pressed, so we're ready to move forward. Now, I will say I'm very happy in retrospect that I picked a fabric for the outside of the envelope that is multi-directional, mostly up and down, because we did flip this one, so it kind of helps there with that. I think if you had picked something that was clearly one directional, and when I was looking at fabrics, I was looking at a stripe, and I can only imagine how that stripe would have done. It might have done okay, it might not have, but just be aware of that. So what they're saying now is we're going to assemble the quilt center, and it looks like it's telling us to do two sides and then the two opposite sides. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I always find that if I mark the center of these triangles and the center of the square, I have better luck. So we're going to do that, and I'm just going to, it's freshly pressed, so I'm able to just make a finger mark on that, and then the finger mark on this, we will line up and pin. So that should put it right in the center for us. And then one on the outside. I think that pin is too big. Okay, there's one side, and we're going to flip it around. For mine, my hearts are going to be at the bottom, and my gray fabric is going to be at the top. Now these are biased edges, so you don't want to stretch them. We're going to line that center up and pin it. One pin on each side, and then one in the middle should do it. Okay, we're gonna sew that real quickly. Now I am using for my straight stitches on the edges my 1/4 inch foot. I always prefer that if I can use it, because it keeps my seam straight and even, and it's consistent from one seam to the next. Okay, keeping consistent, we're going to make sure that the next set of triangles that we sew on is also laid out properly. Let's do some quick little finger pressing so that we can do the centers. You could guess, and you might be right. You might get it in the right spot, but if you don't, you have to rip it out. So I say take just that extra second and do that. It literally was like 5 seconds. And again, they are biased, so you don't want to stretch them. And because we're sewing 2 here, I pin 1 onto this border and 1 onto the other triangle. Same over here. Okay, and we're going to flip it around and do the other one. On the example that they give you, the little color photo on the pattern, they show the envelope being a gray fabric with words printed on them, and I think for an envelope that's just as perfect as you probably could get. But when I went looking, I could not find anything with well, I did find something with words, but I didn't think it was the right kind of words for this particular project. And I found very little in gray, so I had to rely on my stash. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clip back these corners so I can get a nice seam just in the right place. I don't have to work around those, but be sure to leave enough that if you've pinned it wrong, you can correct your mistake. Okay, those little ones can go in the trash. And let's stitch this. Our project, because we're using such large pieces, is getting big really fast. One seam down. I'm trying to make sure that all of the seams do not show under that very pale pink fabric. Now we have all 4 sides on that, and as you can tell, we're down to just a few pieces here to deal with. And we're going to find out where those go right now. Okay. So here we go. Here's our project. I think you're used to seeing it like this in our overhead camera. So we've got the bottom of our envelope, our background fabric, our inner envelope. Now, what is next? The next step is we're just putting on some borders. So the first piece that's going on is this piece here down here. And I do find it interesting that we appear to be pretty short here. That's a bit concerning. How short are we? 3/4 of an inch, I would say. Yeah, 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to check my measurements real quick to make sure I did this right. Okay, I'm back. Now, the good news is we're okay as far as everything goes. The bad news was I just forgot to read a line, because it says after you assemble the quilt center, which is what they're calling this, you need to trim it to 17.5 by 17.5. Okay, that explains why our piece at 17.5 was too short. Now, the quandary I have is I don't have a 17.5 inch ruler. And I want to make sure that we get this as straight and as square as we possibly can, and that we have the pattern appropriately in the design. So I have a 15-inch square ruler. And what I have done was I've lined up the points of this little snowball, I guess you would call it, on the edges of the heart at 1/2 inch from the ends. And it appears to be pretty much centered this way. It could be off a little bit, but it looks like it runs straight this way. We know it's straight that way. And that 7.5 here runs right up the center. So this is a 15-inch ruler. Now, where do we go from there? Well, that's a great question because there's a couple of different solutions we have to this, and I think that the one we're going to go with is using a disappearing ink marker to kind of mark this 15-inch square, and then we can go from there. So let me grab one. Okay, I think we're going to use the purple one because it seems to have a little more ink in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a mark here on this side and on this side, and here and here. Now this is not the cut line, this is the 15-inch line. Okay, and then I'm going to put just a dot, and I don't even know if you're going to be able to see that because my marker is not a real great marker. Let me see if I can find another one. Okay, that one's a little bit better. And the bad thing about the purple one is the purple one disappears. Purple one disappears right away because the humidity in the air will cause it to go away. Okay. All right, so at least we've got something there. Now, what I need to do, we need to trim it 17.5, and this is 15. So we need another inch, and that's going to be 17. So if we move our ruler out to an inch, here and here. Okay, so now we have a 17-inch. So now we need another 1/4 of an inch. So that should be 1.25 inches. Let me check my math. We've got a 15-inch square, and if we adjust it 1 inch all the way around, now we have a 17-inch square. And if we need it another 1/2 inch, 1/4 of an inch should do it. Okay, so that's 1 inch and 1/4 beyond our other mark. So I'm going to check. There it is right there. And there it is right there. And folks, I'm going for it in this corner. Okay, were you as terrorized as I was about cutting that? I was for a moment, then I realized quickly it's still a pretty big size project, and even if we cut it wrong, as long as we're cutting it within the places that we sewed, we can just make it a different size. It is not that critical. So let's go back now and find our marks over here. There it is, and we're going to go 1.25 inches, and we're going to come down to where we cut here, make sure we're still lined up. Those lines are very faint. I don't know that it's super humid here today or if it's just a poor pen. We're just doing 1/4 of this at a time. Okay, we're going to spin it around because it's easier for me to cut. I prefer to cut standing up because I get a little better cut, but it's too cumbersome to do that on camera. Okay, we've lined this up with our marks and we've lined this up with where we've cut. Okay, my ruler slipped as I pulled it off. So let's, easy to do, we just line it up again. And we really weren't talking about cutting that much off. It probably is 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch all the way around. But I do appreciate when they tell me that I need to cut it. And if it will make it fit really well, and I like that too because that's a sign that you're doing things right, that you're on target with where you need to be. So although I don't particularly enjoy the stress of cutting something I just sewed, I do appreciate the vote of confidence it gives me when it works out. Okay, that's all trimmed. And we'll put this off to the side. And we're just going to do a little quick check. 17.5. Yep. And let's check this way. That one looks a little bit longer. But our marks are all right on 1.25 inches. I think we're just going to go with it and see what happens. It's a little bit bigger than it needs to be in some areas. Okay, so this is going to go here, and we're just going to flip that over and look how well that fits now. Just like we would expect. Quick pin there. And I think that these strips will kind of button everything up. All right, so we're going to sew that strip on the bottom. Let me catch up to the right page here because I flipped pages. Okay, and then beyond this, all we're going to do is we're going to sew a strip around the outside. And again, our pattern gave us 2 different lengths for our pieces, our little border pieces. Now I just cut mine at the right width and I just left it as long as my piece was. So it doesn't matter for me which one I do first, but if you cut it exactly the way the pattern tells you, you're going to do opposite sides first and then finish up the other 2. Well, so far this has come together really well, beyond our little not reading the instructions. Easy peasy though in the end to get that. All right, so there it is. Now that is our design. There's our envelope, the inner envelope, the heart, and then the background. And then we're just going to put these background strips on. They're telling us to put the side strips on first and the top and the bottom, so I'm going to do it in that order. I'm going to have to make sure to cut off the selvage of these pieces because I've got selvage on both ends. So I'm going to just do that really quickly, and I'll probably speed this up while I'm sewing and putting these edges on because there's really nothing of any great detail to show you there. Any tips or hints, it's the same thing we've been doing. I am going to pin this seam down since I have not hemmed it. And we will do that on both sides. It's been a really easy pattern, very straightforward. And we're just going to finish this up. So in just a little while, we've been able to put the top together for this project. And I want to show you that it has been pressed. Now I do need to come in here and take out the markings that I put in with the disappearing ink. And they're already beginning to fade, but they need a little bit of help. So here we go. Here is the whole project, and if we hold that up, you can see, let's get the whole thing there. There we go. It's large enough to make an impact, but not so large that it takes a lot of time. And I think you probably could manage this, like I said, in 2 to 3 days, depending on how much time you have to give to it. I think the biggest thing is just cutting those pieces, and like I said, it's pretty straightforward with what sizes, and they're just rectangles and squares and a couple of triangles. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go searching in my stash for something for a backing and a binding. I think I have some little red polka dot, but I'm going to have to dig around and see what I can come up with. So what I'll do is I'll do that, and then I'll come back and film a little segment to put on the end to show you the finished product. Hi, I'm back. I have finished the project we were working on, Love Notes. And this is our Valentine's project, and it went really, really well. I finished up some machine quilting probably in about an hour, hour and a half. I did have to stop a couple of times. And then I put on the binding. That did not take very long. I chose a very, very skinny binding for this one. And I hand stitched down the back side of the binding, and I'll show you that. That's hand stitching, probably took a little over an hour with some breaks here and there and just kind of doing it in some spare time, but it's all done. So clearly in a day we went from cut pieces to finished product. And you probably could squeeze the cutting the pieces in there too in one day if you had some uninterrupted time. So let me show you what it looks like. I've got it pinned on this board so I don't have to hold it, and we can see the whole project at one time. If we can get it to stand up, maybe. So this is the project. And again, this came from, it's a free pattern from the Fat Quarter Shop. And it is available on their website, fatquartershop.com. It's called Love Notes. It is a finished size of 20.5 by 24. Mine might be slightly wider because I think this is about a 22 or 23 by 24 board. And there it is. Now, how I chose to machine quilt it. I'm not a huge fan of machine quilting, perhaps because I'm not as experienced with it. But for a project like this, I think it's just great because it allows you to quickly run through it and produce something that you want to use. What I did was I quilted just straight horizontal lines here on the outer envelope portion, this pink and red heart fabric. And those lines, whoops, oh, we don't want it to fall. Those lines are about 1.5 to 1.75 inches wide. So it just has a few this way. And then the background, I just went with a vertical striped pattern. And those are right at about 1 inch wide. Now, for the inner envelope, I just took one swing around at in this, and it's about excuse me, about 3/8 of an inch, which is right about half of what the width of this is. And it just was an easy place to put that stitch because I could watch that the foot was going right down the middle. And then for the heart, now I noticed my heart, and we talked about this a little bit when we sewed it. I was telling you that this was on a bias and it would stretch, and I think mine did stretch a little bit because there's a little bit of extra fabric in here. So I put in 4 rows of quilting. I put a stitch in here that is about 1/4 of an inch away, and then another stitch in that was the width of the presser foot that I was using. That gave me a good even measurement that I could duplicate. I still didn't like it. It was still too puffy. So I came back in here and put another 2 rows in exactly the same way. There is about 3/8 inch between the second and third row, and then just probably 1/4 inch between those rows. So it almost looks like 2 double rows instead of 4 single rows. And theoretically, I could keep doing this and get further and further into it and really be able to get all those puffiness out. Now, what you could still add to this is you could add more quilting. You could embroider in a saying in here or someone's name. You could do something in this area as well. At this point, I've chosen not to do that because I wanted to keep this project simple and quick so we could get it finished. It's all quilted in white thread. And then let me show you quickly. I've just got a couple of pins in here so we can quickly take this off the back. And you notice we've got a really skinny little binding on this one. This is probably 1/4 of an inch. It is just slightly more than 1/4 of an inch. And I used a red fabric with a tiny little polka dot. And for those observant viewers, you will probably recognize this fabric as the same fabric we did the binding on our Deck the Hall quilt. So a good way to reuse some supplies we already had. And then the back of the project, whoops, paper flew off. Here we go, what that looks like. So very neat. Now I do find that when I am machine quilting, sometimes where I'm stopping and starting lines, I do have a little knot in the threads, especially visible from the back, and I try to trim those off as closely as I can. We're not really displaying this back side, but I try to keep it as neat as I can within reason. And there's the front again. I'm going to stick a couple of pins in here and we'll turn this up to see it this way. I think I'll keep my hand there just in case. Anyway, this has been a great little project. It came together really, really quickly, and it was a lot of fun to do because of the speed of it, I think, more than anything else. And it doesn't require a whole lot of material, so if you're looking for something that you probably could put together with what you have, this is definitely a project that meets those requirements. For my particular purposes, the only fabric I bought for this was this heart fabric here. And I still have more of that left over for scraps or for another project. I thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, please consider a membership. We have memberships starting as low as 99 cents a month. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio.